fog rolled in on a Tuesday afternoon, thick and unnatural, swallowing the edges of Millbrook like a living thing. By evening, every road leading out of town had vanished into an impenetrable white wall. Cell towers went silent, radio signals died. The outside world ceased to exist. Mayor Patricia Hewitt called an emergency town meeting at 7 p.m. The community center was packed. All 847 residents crammed into wooden chairs, their faces etched with confusion and growing fear. Patricia stood at the podium, her usually steady voice wavering. "I've tried everything," she said. "The state police, the governor's office, emergency services. Nothing gets through. The fog, it's like hitting a wall." Old Jim Carver stood up from the third row. "I drove right into it. My truck just stopped, like hitting invisible concrete. When I backed up and tried walking, same thing. We're trapped," murmurs rippled through the crowd. Sarah Chen, the town librarian, raised her hand. "Has anyone noticed the clocks?" Everyone turned to look at the large clock on the wall. 11:47 p.m., Sarah continued. "Every clock in town shows the same time. They're all synchronized, down to the second. That's not normal." Before anyone could respond, the minute hand lurched forward. 11:48. Then 11:49. Each movement seemed to echo through the room, unnaturally loud. 11:58. 11:59. The crowd held its breath. Midnight. The clock chimed, a deep, resonant sound that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. The lights flickered. Someone screamed. When the 12th chime faded, old Jim Carver was gone. Not just gone erased. His chair sat empty, but it was as if he'd never been there at all. The people who'd been sitting beside him looked confused, staring at the space without recognition. "Who screamed?" someone asked. I don't know," replied Martha Wells, Jim's neighbor of 30 years. "Why is this chair empty?" Sarah Chen felt her blood run cold. She remembered Jim. She remembered his truck, his story about the fog. But looking around the room, she saw only blank stares and puzzled expressions. She was the only one. The meeting disbanded in confusion. People filed out, muttering about the strange fog and the late hour. Sarah grabbed Mayor Hewitt's arm. "Patricia, don't you remember Jim Carver? He was just here." Patricia frowned. "Jim who?" "Sarah, are you feeling all right?" Sarah's hands shook. She pulled out her phone, scrolling through her contacts. No Jim Carver. She checked the town directory she always kept in her purse. The page where his name should have been showed someone else entirely. Every trace of his existence had vanished. That night, Sarah didn't sleep. She sat at her kitchen table with a notebook, writing down everything she remembered about Jim Carver. His white truck, his love of fishing, his wife who died 10 years ago, his daughter who lived in Portland. Every detail she could recall, she documented, terrified that if she didn't, even her memories might fade. The next day, the town continued as if nothing had happened. People went about their routines, seemingly unaware they were trapped. The fog remained, a perfect white barrier at every town border. Sarah tried to talk to others about Jim, but they looked at her with concern and suggested she see Dr. Patel at the clinic. She spent the day in the library, searching through records. Every mention of Jim Carver had vanished. Birth certificates, property records, newspaper articles, all gone or altered. In the 1987 Millbrook High Yearbook, where Jim's senior photo should have been, there was just an empty space, as if the printer had made an error. That evening, Sarah visited her friend Marcus, the town's unofficial historian. His house was cluttered with documents, photos, and artifacts from Millbrook's past. If anyone might remember Jim, it would be Marcus. "You look terrible," Marcus said, pouring her tea. "Marcus, do you remember Jim Carver?" He paused, frowning. "No, should I? He lived on Elm Street, drove a white truck. You bought fishing lures from him last summer." Marcus shook his head slowly. "Sarah, I think you need rest. This fog situation has everyone on edge." As they talked, Sarah noticed the clock on Marcus's mantel. 11:43 p.m. Her heart began to race. "Marcus, we need to pay attention." "At midnight." "At midnight what?" he asked. She explained about the synchronized clocks, about Jim disappearing at exactly midnight. Marcus listened with skepticism, but agreed to stay awake and observe. 11:57, 11:58, 11:59. They sat in tense silence, eyes fixed on the clock. Midnight. The chimes rang out, deep and hollow. The lights flickered. When Sarah's vision cleared, she was alone in Marcus's living room. His teacup sat on the table, still steaming, but Marcus was gone. "No, no, no," Sarah whispered, searching the house. Every photo on the walls had changed. Marcus had been erased from them all. His name was gone from the spines of the local history books he'd authored. The house itself felt different, as if it had always been empty. Sarah ran outside. The fog hung thick and oppressive, seeming to press in from all sides. The town slept peacefully, unaware that another of their number had been taken. In windows, she could see the blue glow of televisions. Families settled in for the night, carrying on as if the world beyond the fog still existed. The next morning, Sarah walked through town with her notebook, approaching everyone she met. "Do you remember Jim Carver? Marcus Thompson?" The responses were always the same: confusion, concern, suggestions that she see a doctor. At the grocery store, she overheard Mrs. Patterson talking to the cashier. "It's strange. I feel like I'm forgetting something important. Like there's a gap in my memory." Sarah's pulse quickened. She approached them. "Mrs. Patterson, what kind of gap?" The elderly woman looked troubled. "I don't know, dear. Yesterday, I was organizing my recipe box, and I found a card for Jim's famous fish fry. But I don't know any Jim." "Isn't that odd? A trace, a remnant." Sarah felt a spark of hope. "I remember Jim. He was real." Mrs. Patterson's eyes widened. "You do?" They talked in hushed tones, and Sarah showed her the notebook. Mrs. Patterson remembered the taste of Jim's fish fry, the smell of it at the summer fair, but not Jim himself. It was as if her memories had been selectively edited. That day, Sarah found 17 people who had similar experiences, fragments of memory that didn't quite fit, gaps they couldn't explain. She gathered them at her house that evening, away from prying eyes. "Something is taking people," Sarah explained. "Every night at midnight, someone disappears, and everyone forgets they existed. But some of us retain pieces. We need to figure out why." Dr. Patel, who was among the group, raised a logical concern. "If this is true, how do we know how many have already been taken? We could have lost dozens, hundreds even." The thought chilled them all. How many friends, family members, loved ones had been erased without their knowledge. Young Amy Sullivan, who worked at the post office, spoke up. "The population sign. When I drove past it yesterday, it said 845, but I could swear it used to be higher. They had 2 hours until midnight." Sarah assigned tasks. Some would observe different parts of town. Others would try to document everyone they could remember. Mrs. Patterson and Dr. Patel would stay with Sarah to witness whatever happened at midnight. As the clock approached midnight, Sarah's group positioned themselves around her living room, notebooks ready. The synchronized ticking seemed louder tonight, each second a hammer blow. 11:59. Sarah gripped her pen tight. "Whatever happens, we write it down. We remember." Midnight, the chimes rang out. The lights flickered and died completely for 3 long seconds. In the darkness, Sarah heard a sound like tearing paper, like reality itself was being edited. When the lights returned, Amy Sullivan's chair was empty. "Who were we waiting for?" Dr. Patel asked, looking at the empty chair with confusion. "Amy," Sarah shouted. "Amy Sullivan. She works at the post office." Blank stares met her outburst. Even Mrs. Patterson, who had been so receptive before, looked at her with concern. Sarah frantically wrote Amy's name, her job, her red hair and cheerful smile. She was the only one who remembered. The next few days blurred together. Each night, someone vanished. The population sign changed. 843, 842, 841. Sarah's notebook grew thick with names and details. She noticed a pattern. It wasn't random. The disappeared were being selected. The first night had taken the oldest resident, then the town historian, then the postal worker who connected everyone. Key people, people who held the town's memory and connections. Sarah realized with growing horror that she might be next. As the librarian, she was a keeper of knowledge, a guardian of the town's recorded history. The thought of being erased, of no one remembering her existence, filled her with a terror deeper than death. On the 5th night, Sarah didn't go home. She hid in the library basement, surrounded by town records and historical documents. If something was targeting people who preserved Millbrook's memory, Then she would make herself hard to find. Midnight came and went. The chimes echoed through the empty library, but Sarah remained. In the morning, she emerged to find another gap in the town. The school principal was gone, and with him, the memory of countless students' achievements and growth. Sarah knew she couldn't hide forever. Whatever was happening to Millbrook, she needed to find the source. The fog had arrived on Tuesday. The erasures began that night. There had to be a connection. She spent the day researching, pulling old newspapers and town records. In the archives, she found something strange, a pattern of similar events throughout history. In 1923, the nearby town of Ashford had reported a mysterious fog before losing all contact with the outside world. It was found abandoned months later, completely empty. In 1876, the logging town of Pine Ridge had sent one last telegram. The fog brings forgetting every 47 years, the same interval, and now it was Millbrook's turn. Deeper in the archives, Sarah found a journal from 1829, written by a traveling preacher. The Indians speak of this land with fear. They say it is a place where the world grows thin. Every generation, the land must feed. It takes a town, person by person, memory by memory, until nothing remains but empty buildings and forgotten dreams. They will not say what it feeds, only that it has always been so. Sarah's hands trembled, an ancient hunger, older than the town itself, selecting them for consumption. But consumption of what? Their physical bodies remained. She checked the cemetery, and Jim Carver's grave was gone, the earth undisturbed, as if it had never been dug. It wasn't taking their bodies. It was taking their existence itself. That night, Sarah gathered the few people who still showed signs of remembering: Mrs. Patterson, Dr. Patel, teenage Danny Morrison, who delivered newspapers, and Rebecca Chen, the baker. 5 people out of 839 remaining residents. "We can't stop it," Sarah said, "but maybe we can preserve something. Prove we existed." They spent the hours until midnight creating a time capsule, photos, letters, personal items. Sarah included her notebook with its growing list of the erased. They sealed it in a metal box and buried it in the town square, marking the spot with a pattern of stones. 11:59. "Remember us," Sarah whispered. Midnight. The chimes rang. The world twisted. Dr. Patel vanished mid-word, his voice cutting off like a severed wire. The others looked around in confusion. "Why are we in the town square?" Danny asked. Sarah felt the isolation crushing down. 3 people left who remembered fragments. How many more nights? On the 10th night, Sarah was alone in her knowledge. Mrs. Patterson, Rebecca, Danny, all gone. The town carried on with 803 residents, none of them aware they'd once been 847. The fog remained, patient and impenetrable. Sarah no longer hid. She spent her days walking through town, memorizing faces, names, stories. She filled notebook after notebook, though she knew they too would vanish when her time came. She was the last witness to the true Millbrook, the keeper of erased souls. On the 15th night, only 724 people remained. The town felt hollow, like a stage set with too few actors. Shops remained closed, their owners forgotten. Houses stood empty, their occupants erased from reality itself. Sarah sat in the library, surrounded by her notebooks. She'd written everything she could remember about everyone who'd been taken. 123 names, 123 lives, 123 people who had laughed and loved and lived in Millbrook, now existing only in her memory and her careful handwriting. The clock showed 11:57. She thought about the journal entry. The land must feed. Every 47 years, it selected a town and slowly devoured its existence, person by person, memory by memory. When the last person vanished, what would remain? Empty buildings that would be found months later, mysterious and abandoned, with no trace of the souls who'd once filled them. Or would even the buildings fade? Would Millbrook itself be erased, leaving only an empty field where a town had once stood? 11:59. Sarah opened a fresh notebook and wrote, "My name is Sarah Chen. I am the librarian of Millbrook. I am the last person who remembers the 846 souls who have been taken by the fog. I don't know who will find this, or if anyone will. But we were real. We existed. We lived and loved and mattered. The fog comes every 47 years. It feeds on existence itself. It takes us one by one at midnight, erasing us from history, from memory, from reality itself. Only one person remembers the last to go. I am that person now. If you find this, know that Millbrook was real. Jim Carver was real. Marcus Thompson was real. Amy Sullivan was real. All of them, every name in these notebooks, they were real. We were real. Midnight, the clock began to chime. Sarah felt it then, the pull, the unraveling. She was being edited out of existence. Every trace of her life being carefully removed from the world. Her notebooks began to fade, the ink disappearing like morning mist. The library itself grew hazy, as if seen through deep water. With the last of her strength, the last of her existence, Sarah grabbed a pencil and scratched 4 words into the wooden desk. We were real. Remember. The 12th chime faded. The library was empty. It had always been empty. The fog lifted at dawn, retreating like a living thing that had fed its fill. Where Millbrook had stood, only an empty field remained. No buildings, no roads, no sign that 847 people had lived and worked and loved there, except in the center of the field, where the town square had been, a pattern of stones marked a spot. Beneath them, a metal box waited. Inside, a notebook filled with names, and on its cover, 4 words scratched deep. We were real, remember.